walls were coming down. There was like a waste pipe from the other flat that was leaking into the wall. So the wall was literally saturated with shit.
Yeah.
There was bed bugs, cockroaches. I actually went vegetarian for a while, and I tell you what, I did 6 months of vegetarianism and I felt terrible afterwards.
Won't be back.
No, I won't be back. But I did it wrong, not to slate vegetarianism, but I did it wrong. I was eating a lot of highly processed foods. But the tax benefits with whiskey are there's zero capital gains. You're not paying any VAT or anything when you buy, excuse me, because it has a predictable lifespan of less than 50 years. So HMRC class it as a wasting asset. And it's the same with things like wine and fine art as well. And say I had one guy recently, I was like, oh, I'm looking to sell this. What can you offer me for it? And I was like, oh, I gave him a price. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, I paid £5,000 or so 5 years ago. And I'm saying to him, like, it's not worth £5,000 now. It's not worth anywhere near it, basically.
Before we dive into this episode, I want to ask you to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. It helps keep growing the channel and keep getting fantastic guests like this one. Julian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Carl. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I was thinking where to start this one, and I'd love you to describe what it is that you do in 2024.
In 2024, I mean, it's kind of changed over the years as well a lot, but just now the way I describe myself is I sell whiskey, essentially. So I'm what's known as an independent bottler, and I buy and sell casks as well as investments. So I run the company DamGoodDrams, and then our independent bottling brand Glaschu Spirits Co., which I've got here on the table.
Yeah, and then I guess off the side of that as well, we've got so many different areas to go into as well. Property investment off the back of that too, which enables some of these moving parts. But I wonder how different today's conversation would be if you had absolutely perfect eyesight.
Very different. And I thought you might go back into this. So essentially when I was a kid, my dream job was always to be a commercial pilot. And it started when I was 16. My dad got me a trial flight lesson from Cumbernauld, which was like an hour up in a little 2-seater plane. And I just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the sensations, the sounds, the feeling. I love engines, basically. I'm a car guy as well, so planes fits into that very well. And I just wanted to be a pilot from that moment on. I went to Florida when I was 18 and did my PPL there, which is like your private pilot's license. It's the first one you do. I stayed there for 8 weeks, flew every day, flying over the Everglades and everything. It was great. And then I came back here, converted my license. But when I wanted to progress to the commercial license, I failed on eyesight on my medical exam. So pilot
what kind of age are you at this point?
I was 19 at that point.
And that had always been the goal. Like, I'm going to be a commercial airline pilot for an EasyJet, an Emirates, Ryanair.
Loganair was actually who I wanted to work for. I really wanted to fly. It's kind of a weird dream, but I really wanted to fly the small aircraft to the islands, the Scottish islands, the ones that land on the beach in Barra and the little Twin Otter aircraft. That was what I wanted to fly, just because it seemed fun.
How do you deal with a setback like that?
It was pretty challenging. Like, I didn't really know what else to do at that point, and then engineering was my kind of fallback plan to that. So after that, I just thought, okay, I'll go to uni, I'll study engineering instead, and that's what I did.
And I guess at least it's in a slightly similar field where you were dealing with the things that you would be the one that wanted to fly. I guess that was what things ended up like, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I always saw it like, I'll work on aircraft and then I'll fly them in my spare time as a hobby. So I went through college. I didn't quite have the grades to go straight into engineering from school, so you needed like 6 A's at higher sort of thing. It was quite strict, especially for Glasgow. So I went to college first, did my HNC, HND, and that's where I met my business partner, Paul, as well, who I started the whiskey business with. And then I went to university.
Sometimes these things are meant to happen.
Exactly. No, it does all happen for a reason in that sense. And then Paul and I actually started working together in the same company as well.
After you both graduated?
Yep. Oh. And then we worked there for 5 years.
Wow.
And then
I guess if I'm to think of the Julian from that point in time, he's very different from the Julian that I see now, and who's very different to the Julian that might have been a commercial pilot. There's so many different sliding doors moments. What do you reflect on as being big moments that maybe changed the path, apart from, of course, not getting that commercial pilot license?
my life's definitely changed a lot in the last 5, 6 years. And I don't think I'd ever expect to be where I am now. I think the point that kind of changed it was when my dad passed away 2019. From that point on, everything kind of changed for me, and it was quite sudden. Like, we were on holiday in Tenerife, wasn't expecting it at all, and I was actually there for over a month waiting for everything to kind of happen. You know, he died on the island, he had to get cremated there, we had to get him back to the UK, which isn't as easy as it sounds. So I was in this kind of limbo period in a sunny location, but kind of mourning there. So I went through a lot of reflection, a lot of pain at that point as well. And I feel like I kind of broke my character down to be able to build it back up to where I am now. From 2019 to 2020, things just didn't really go my way in life. I wasn't happy with my job. I wasn't happy with my relationship. I knew something had to change. I was in a comfortable job. I was in a comfortable relationship. I should have probably been happy with where I was, but I wasn't. I had this constant dread, like this heavy chest. I knew something had to change. And then 2020 was when I took action. I saw that. I felt like 2019 was my warning sign. Something was happening. 2020, I saw the opportunity. And I've said to you before, it's like I was in a moving train. The train slowed down just enough for me to see the door and the platform, and I jumped and I took action. And that was my window of opportunity to take. And my life's changed completely since then, just because I did that then.
I think so many people had that potential moment in 2020, and you and I have got maybe strong opinions on what was happening during that time, but it did give people a moment to pause and reflect. But I guess you were maybe predisposed to make more use of that pause because of those feelings that were building up during 2019. And thank you for speaking about your dad in that way, and I'm sure we'll revisit elements of that as the discussion goes today. But you said a feeling of dread despite being comfortable in the job. I know you were earning good money for the age you were in particular, and that's sometimes something that can keep us somewhere. And you mentioned like a comfortable but not great relationship. How would you describe that feeling of dread?
A heavy chest. I felt like I was on the wrong path. Like I was going down a road I couldn't go back on if I went too far, in that sense. And it was almost like the universe was telling me I need to fucking change course I'm going.
I think a lot of people are in that path though.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody listening to this is feeling a bit like, am I meant to be doing this?
It was manifesting itself into anxiety and paranoia and arguments with my partner at the time and going out drinking every weekend, you know. Looking back on it, escapism, exactly. I was doing that to kind of escape the feelings that I had midweek. I was looking forward to drinking every Friday or every Saturday, and yeah, I wasn't living a good life back then.
I think a lot of people can fall into that for long periods. I'm glad it wasn't longer for you. And I guess if we fast forward to that jumping out onto the platform moment in 2020, what were some of the things that allowed you to jump out?
If we go back 2019 when my dad died, he actually left me a little bit of money. It was his life insurance that was paid out. He was German, so it was paid out in euros. I had to open up a German bank account. And in 2019 till 2020, it was sitting in that German bank account, and I could see it in an app. And you actually had to pay to have this money in there. So I wasn't using any of it, but I was watching it go down like €7 every month sort of thing, just red. And I kept thinking, I need to do something with this. Like that thought kept coming to me, and I was like looking at things here and there, and I tried like a little bit of like Forex, and I was looking into crypto and stuff like that as well back then. And I actually, annoyingly, I bought some Bitcoin back then, and I sold it like, I know, 6 months later.
Oh, Julian.
If only I'd held. Like, if only I'd held. But like these things, I don't know, they didn't speak out to me as much. And then in 2020, I got a Facebook ad for the guy from Homes Under the Hammer, Martin Roberts. He was like, join my free property course, learn how to do property in a weekend, basically. It was all over Zoom. So I went on that course, and of course there's always an upsell to these things. So I ended up buying a longer course, and that taught me everything I needed to know about basic buy to let, basically, like buying, refurbishing, refinancing, the kind of fundamentals of property investing. And then, as if the stars aligned, just after I finished the course, the property market opened up again. And I was still furloughed, locked down, nothing else to do. So I just started hammering viewings, and I was going to,
of course, because
multiple viewings every
you were
day.
working in the airline industry.
Yeah.
And that was one of the industries that was definitely going to stop. I mean,
No one was flying.
Yeah, I mean, you were probably lucky that it was furlough rather than redundancy at that point.
Down the line, a lot of people did get made redundant, and Paul, my business partner, was one of them. And that was something that highlighted the insecurity of that job. Like, if he's in the same boat as me, like we went in there at the same time, we were basically in the same job, just different teams. If he's being axed so quickly, like I could be next. And somehow I did manage to hold on a little bit longer, but I knew like I have to get an escape plan basically. And 2020 is when I started making that escape plan. I didn't leave for a couple of years later, but I started taking action then.
That's really cool though. And I think, as you say, the property market opened up, you'd kind of armed yourself with some education. And I find it really funny because I've had many educators who have courses on the podcast, many of which have great reputations, but there's still this stigma around online courses and education. But without that, how confident would you have been going with your inheritance to try and build an investment portfolio?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to start. I wouldn't have even known about property investing probably. That's what gave me the knowledge to go. And I think courses do get bad stigma, but it's the people that go on the courses and then don't do anything. And they'll then complain and say, oh, this was a waste of money, this was a scam, blah, blah, blah. But it's down to you ultimately. Like the educator is just providing the information. If you don't take action, then that's your fault.
Yeah, that's true. There's like different layers to any education. There's like how to, and then there's done for you.
Yeah.
And some people think that when they enroll in a course, it's the done for you part. Same in the fitness industry. Like, you know, I interviewed David Hatwatts from MTN, and he always laughs about the number of people that come into the programs and think that just by signing up for online personal training, you're guaranteed a result, but you're guaranteed the same result that you saw in the advert that got you to click through and inquire. And you're thinking, no, that is like one of the outliers who excelled within the program. In the same way, Martin Roberts probably had a testimonial of somebody who went from 0 to 3 properties in the first 6 months. And you're thinking, I can do that. And of course you can, but the vast majority of people who do these courses don't, or they don't get quite that level of result.
Yeah. And I had a head start as well. I had some money to go with. It wasn't enough to build everything I've built now. It was 70,000 euros, so it was just enough for 2 basically. And then I refinanced another one that my parents owned, and then the rest was all investor funds raised from Instagram actually.
Yeah, and well, again, I think we'll talk about that, but I guess there's sometimes misconceptions with inheritance and how much it is and what it can potentially do with it. And if you had maybe lumped 70k into Bitcoin, who knows what it could have become, but it could have gone, but at points it could have been worth 20k just based on the market. Yeah. Whereas with property, you mentioned 2. What were those first 2 early ones like?
One I've sold now. I had to, unfortunately.
Was this the problem one?
This was the problem one, yeah.
God help whoever's got it now.
Yeah, so actually the two that I bought on the same day. Both of them completed on the same day because I was putting out so many offers. It just so happened that 2 got accepted and 2 were kind of going through everything straight away. So I started with 2 straight away. One in Westmoreland Street in Govanhill and one in Denniston. You can probably imagine which one was the problem one, but
yeah, I can. Yeah,
it was a nightmare. It was a total nightmare. Everything from it basically needed 30k worth of work, which I hadn't factored in for. I thought it'd be maybe 15 or 20, but it needed full rewire. Walls were coming down. There was like a waste pipe from the other flat that was leaking into the wall, so the wall was literally saturated with shit.
Yeah.
There was bed bugs, cockroaches. A lot of stuff happening on that street as well, Westmoreland Street back then. I don't know if you remember in 2020, there was a lot of...
The guy did the expose, didn't he, where he spoke about that was right there. The Roma and the children, which, again, we maybe won't speak about it in the podcast, but yeah, it was a very problematic area.
Yeah. So yeah, Westmoreland Street wasn't ideal. The other one, Denniston, perfect.
And you still have it?
Still one of my best ones, yeah.
When you get your hands on 2 properties straight away, what does that feel like? Because it's such a novel experience, and you're still working full time at this moment, or are you back?
It's still lockdown.
Okay.
So by the time they'd completed and I got the keys, I was back working, but working from home. So I still had a bit of freedom, obviously, and a bit of leeway. And to be honest, I did take the piss a little bit with how I was working from home. There was times, especially when I was going out for viewings, I had my laptop in the car with me and I'd go between viewings, wiggle a mouse, go to the next viewing sort of thing, take a call, go to the next view. And I was maximizing my time because I knew I had to get out, basically. I didn't see myself in that job anymore, and it kind of reflected in how I was working there too.
Yeah, I understand that. So these were 2 buy-to-lets. Was that the strategy from the start based off what you'd learned?
That was the strategy from the start. So the course that I did was actually an English-based course, so there was a lot of other strategies in there that are exciting and exotic, rent-to-rent, HMO, stuff like that. The only one I kind of saw myself doing and working here was basic buy-to-let, just buying something at a discount, doing work to it, adding value to it, getting a tenant in it, refinancing it, and pulling the some of the money, if not all of it, out.
That's
Obviously,
cool.
best case scenario is you pull all of it out, but you don't find those deals all the time. Like,
Yeah, they're not perfect. And those first 2, they weren't quite like that.
no. Nowhere near as good.
But I went and found that your old Instagram handle was called 10 Tenements.
It was indeed. Yeah.
Why was that?
Damn. I didn't think that was still out there. My plan was...
I've got sneaky ways of finding these things
I know,
out.
I knew there'd be some things like this. So my thing was, for financial freedom, I kind of worked out I needed 10 flats for the cash flow that I could leave my job, basically. So I really like architecture. I like Victorian tenements. I love high ceilings, cornicing, bay windows, that sort of thing. I always thought, okay, if I'm going to buy property, I'm going to buy properties I like the look of. In hindsight, it's not a very good strategy, especially tenements in the likes of the West End. You know, you're not going to get very good yields. You're going to get great appreciation, but they're more expensive to buy. You'll get much better yields buying things like 3-bed houses and ex-local authority houses and so. But my plan was always 10 tenements and then I'm out, sort of thing. Then I'm out of my job and I can just focus full time on property and the whiskey business.
And did you crunch those numbers that said that 10 was the magic number?
Yeah, basically. I think it worked out as something like, if each one cash flowed at least 200 a month, then I'd be making $2,000 a month. And that was kind of my outgoings.
Yeah,
at the
and
time.
post-tax salary was roughly whatever, so you can be like, oh, well, I'm not taking a step back in wages.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's really helpful to be as prescriptive as that. And then other times I think it's better to have like an astronomical goal that's almost like so far beyond that. But going from 0 to 10 houses is actually like a long process. Like we don't have to talk about how many you have now. I know people are quite private about that, but scaling to that number within a short period of time to get yourself free from a job that you've decided you want to leave and you're putting in the kind of motions to do that is quite a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when like the likes of people starting it with no money and they're looking to just raise that from investor funds. It is hard finding the deals that stack to do that. I've had the benefit of having some money, so I could leave money on the table in these deals. But I think it's definitely possible. Otherwise, people wouldn't be doing it. Like
that's true. You had role models.
I saw so many other people doing it, and that's when I was getting a lot of content about property at the time as well. And I was looking at people like Paul McFadden. I never actually did any of Paul's courses. In hindsight, I kind of wish I'd done Paul's instead of the English-based one, because I probably would have
more
learned.
Specific, maybe.
Yeah, I would have learned a lot more Scottish-based stuff and met a lot more Scottish-based investors. There was nobody from Scotland on the course that I was doing. It was all Zoom-based anyways, but still, I did feel a little bit out of place. But I was seeing content from Paul, people like Richard Dixon as well, and I was like, look, all these people are doing it. It's definitely possible. I just have to really try hard and keep putting in the effort and putting in the work and hammer out viewings. I saw it as a numbers game, basically.
How many viewings are we talking to get your first few properties?
I think in 2020, I probably did close to 100 viewings. I was doing them all the time, every day almost, as much as I could get. And I was putting in silly offers, and most of the time I was just getting told to fuck off, basically. Like,
what keeps you going then?
The need to leave my job, basically.
And you recognise that?
The need to get out. Yeah, I recognise that, and it goes a little bit deeper than that. There was a reason why I wanted to leave my job ultimately as well. I didn't enjoy being there. I didn't enjoy working, but my dad was a big role model for me, and he was actually a stay-at-home dad. He worked on the rigs before, and when I was born, he quit his job and dedicated all his time to sort of take care of me and raise me, and he he was there for everything. Like he would take me to school. If it wasn't nice, I'd walk, obviously. But he was there for like me growing up and birthdays and all that. Whereas my mum worked really hard and she did miss a lot of that because she sacrificed that. I wanted the same thing for my kids. I wanted to be there for them growing up as much as I possibly could, basically. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this in my engineering job where I am. I wanted that financial freedom that everyone was talking about at the time. And like, it was the media and the content I was consuming as well was all about this financial freedom. So that's what I was chasing.
I think we are what we consume to a large extent.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of messages from people over the last 2-3 years about listening to the podcast lots and being inspired by different guests to go and do different things. But if you are soaking in that all the time, things become a lot more normal. So in the same way, if you see a Richard or a Paul or a Stephen Clark or whoever else in Scotland talking about property and how it's a vehicle for the lifestyle they live and the lifestyle their students live, then you can sort of join the dots. And like a question that sometimes I'll ask myself, and I've done this a lot more recently to try and get over any sort of barriers I have to some of the things that I should have been doing up until now. Why not me? Like, why not? Am I less capable? Maybe. Am I less brave? Potentially. But we won't know unless we go for it.
Exactly. And I think it's self-belief as well is one of the things that you kind of need to take that plunge. Like that was something I really lacked back at the start, 2019 or so. Like I didn't believe in myself at all. It was 2020 when I started consuming that content. That also led, it was like a Pandora's box. As soon as I started the property course, it opened up so many other things because a lot of these property courses start with mindset. Like that's a big thing. And I've done a couple like little ones and they all start with mindset. They all talk about overcoming the kind of mental blocks that people normally have. And then that led me on to looking into mindset a bit more and developing that. And I did another course with a guy called John Kehoe. It was all about mind power. And that got me into writing down my thoughts, writing down my goals, journaling, affirmations, visualization, and gratitude ultimately as well. And it was a slow process, but it completely changed who I was. And ultimately it allowed me to believe in myself that, okay, I have the power to change the course of my life. I can actually do this myself. Like I'm not stuck in the place I am. And I think if I had to look back at my life, my greatest achievement so far is finding that self-belief. Without it, I'd be back where I was back then.
Which of those tools do you put the most stock in?
Of the
ones that you named, the kind of John Kehoe ones that inspired you?
I practice all of them daily.
Still.
Okay. It's quite nice. I have one book and it's pretty much what I started writing in 4 years ago. So I've still got the original notes there and I'm still going through it. And it's something I don't write in it every day, but I read it every day. So I don't really journal per se of what I'm grateful for. I'll do it maybe once a month. And then I'll read that every morning and I'll reflect on it. And that kind of, it's split into a couple of sections. So like my first page is what I'm grateful for. I'll start with that. And then I'll go into where do I want to be? I'll like visualize what do I actually want out of life? Where am I going? I call that my golden path, basically. And it's a name I coined from Dune, the sci-fi series.
I've seen that film, yeah.
I saw the first film and I really liked it, so I started reading the books. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to reading. So
You're down the rabbit hole.
I like fantasy books. So I started reading Dune and there's this concept in there. I won't give too much away, spoilers or anything, but they have the power to kind of see where humanity's going and there's only a very thin path for them to survive like all of humanity. So he can see the future and they have to do this thing. So he calls it the golden path. And I saw that as well, like, okay, this is my future. If I write it down, I need to direct my actions into what I need to do to get to there. So I kind of look at it the same way. So I'm like, okay, I want family, a stable family, good relationship with my kids, my wife. I've got financial goals in there, business goals in there, athletic goals, health goals as well. And then after that, it's affirmations. Okay, you fucking got this. You can do it. Like, and what I kind of need
ones
to do.
That reinforce your self-belief.
Exactly. What I need to do to get to there. Like, I am the man that can do this sort of thing.
One of the biggest things that I spoke about in the podcast, probably about a year ago now, with a guy called Ross Harkness, who's a big expert in like self-mastery, is frameworks like, does this action move me closer to my hell life or my dream life?
Mm-hmm.
And then others like, ego's not always the enemy. If you align your ego with your habits and behaviors to become that version of yourself. So for example, in recent months and years, I've spoken about myself as a 6-figure sales guy that earns 6 figures but produces 7 figures of revenue for the companies that he works for. Best believe I need to be on the phone like a 6-figure sales guy. I need to present like a 6-figure sales guy. I need to close like a 6-figure sales guy. I need to deal with rejection like a 6-figure sales guy. And if I don't, then it's delusional.
Yep.
So if you were to say, I want to have a fantastic financial situation, I want to have a thriving whiskey business, I want to have a booming property portfolio, I want to have this amazing relationship and kids, and then you act out of alignment with that, I think that's where so many people go wrong in terms of the aspirations they set, and then understanding what it takes to live in alignment with that. And I think that's part of the reason that we have quite a large men's mental health crisis, that there's a big delta and gap between who we kind of idealize as we are and maybe how we spend our time.
Yeah, definitely. I think reading that every morning kind of sets my GPS like for the day. I read that and it kind of tells me what I need to do in the day. My intention is set basically.
How easy do you find it to adhere to those higher ideals?
I definitely do slip up, of course, but I almost feel I'm very much a believer of where the mind goes, energy flows. And I do try to remind myself that during the day. I feel like when I'm on the path, my golden path, I'm rewarded. The things I do that are good, I'm rewarded. I see that. But I'm also punished if I do bad things. I feel like if I fuck up, I see the consequences of that, and that kind of keeps me straight. And it's almost like a religious thing. I'd say I probably am religious. I'm not a churchgoer by any means, but I do see like, okay, there's something keeping score and I need to stay on track to get what I want, basically.
I think that's powerful. And I think more of us have become spiritual over the last few years, especially even guys that are chasing financial success and family success in the way that you and I talk about.
Yeah.
There's that kind of third strand to it where it's like, well, somebody's keeping score. Somebody said this to me once. She was a yoga teacher actually, and she was like, do you ever like not pay for the bag in the supermarket? And I was like, no, not really. Like normally like scan it or whatever, like if I get a bag for life, whatever. And she was like, yeah, because I think people that do that, they should remember that somebody's always keeping score. And I was like, oh, that's a hard one, because a lot of people would just be like, fuck it, it's 5p, like fuck Asda or the big corporation or whatever, it doesn't matter. But she was like, oh, somebody's keeping score. And I was like, oh, that's quite a frightening thought that you're being watched in every little of your interaction.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
In terms of this kind of journey then, where does the whiskey side of things come in? Because you're building this property portfolio, which I guess is probably where you started creating content online first.
Yeah.
10 tenements. Where does the whiskey side of things come into it?
Around the same time, actually. It was, excuse me, it was just after or around the time that Paul was made redundant, and he came to me with the idea. He'd actually had the whiskey knowledge. He used to work in a whiskey shop. So I liked whiskey growing up as well. My parents always had good whiskey in the house. And I just thought it was a cool drink. It was a cool manly kind of drink. Like I enjoyed a dram of whiskey and it felt very Scottish. But Paul had the knowledge. So he worked in a shop and he would recommend me stuff to try and to buy. And, oh, this bottle might go up in value quite well. Or this is something really delicious. You should try it. And we'd drink whiskey together when we were in college and in uni. And he introduced me to independent bottlings, which is what this is. It's essentially when someone buys a cask of whiskey and bottles it under their own brand as a third-party product, essentially. So like say this is distilled at Macduff Distillery, but it's not Macduff's branding. It's my brand. I didn't make it. I bought it and bottled it. So there's a lot of other little small grassroots companies like this out there, and what they produce is a lot more creative than what you'd buy from a distillery, basically. And I just fell in love with that. We both did. We realized there wasn't really one place to buy all of our favorite brands. We were drinking stuff from Uncharted or from Fable or Firkin. These are some of the other brands. And we said, okay, we'll just reach out to all these guys, see if we can buy some wholesale, start an online shop. And then that's how DamGoodDrams was started. And There was, I don't know if you've done your research this much, but there
Sip
was,
and sell?
yeah, I thought there might be that. There was a failed attempt before it, Sip and Sell, and it was basically an online auction house is kind of how we saw it. Paul had a family friend that had some collectible bottles that we did sell some, but there wasn't meat on the bone for it. You know, we were making like 10% margin on collectible bottles.
It's so unlikely that the first dabble is going to work perfectly.
Yeah.
And in the same way you talked about the 2 property deals you did, one of them caused you a headache, probably cost you more money than you wanted, wasn't particularly profitable. One of them worked out great.
Yeah.
But you had 100 shots to get 2 in that first year. In the same way you start a whiskey auction house online, it might work, but there's risk to it. And I think that's why sometimes we don't start things.
Yeah. But it's seeing through that failure and pushing through just to...
What did you learn from
that we need higher margins was a big thing. And also it was the inconsistency. You know, we had one collection of rare bottles. They were limited. Like, what do we do when we sell out of those? We need something, a product that we can buy and resell, basically. And that's how we came to, okay, we'll buy someone else's product. But that ultimately led to us creating our own. You know, we're working with other bottlers, some people looking for casks of whiskey, some people trying to buy them. We were putting two together, and then ultimately we started buying some for ourselves. So we started our own little collection, and the plan was always to bottle them, but we ended up selling some initially to raise capital for the shop. But then in 2022, we started our first bottling, which was the Spirit of Glaschu.
Which is Glaswegian, Gaelic for Glasgow.
Glasgow, yeah. I'm butchering the pronunciation, and I've been hammered by the Gaelic community many times.
Have you?
I think it's Glaschu is the correct, but Glaschu is much easier to market.
Everyone that I speak to about it calls it Glaschu.
Yeah,
so
Glaschu is just...
Some of the friends that we've got invested in it have all described it as that.
It's easier to say than Glaschu, definitely, but it's our brand. It's Glaschu Spirits Go. But the name did actually change. So our first bottling was the Spirit of Glaschu. And it was a Blair Athol, 7 years old, in a Jamaican rum barrel, so nice, interesting. And it had a yellow label and a ship on it, and it was based off an Anchor Line poster. Don't know if you know the restaurant, the Anchor Line.
Yeah, I do, in Glasgow. Oh, not far from where we are today.
Yeah. It was basically a shipping company back in the Industrial Revolution, shipping line out of Glasgow to the rest of the world. But they had really cool posters. They were kind of like vintage travel poster-esque style, very art deco. So we thought this is a great kind of theme to go for with our labels. That was our first one. But then after we'd released it, we'd bottled it, everything like that, started selling it. We got a lawyer's letter from a big distillery saying that we need to stop what we're doing. They've got the trademark for the Spirit of Glasgow, and we're the Spirit of Glaschu. And we're like, oh, fuck, like, what are we going to do? We've already got this product out on market. We can't recall it now. It's our first one as well. We'd already...
What kind of investment were we talking to get that started?
It was, the cask was about $4,000, and I think maybe the bottling, the rest was maybe $5,000 altogether. But there was some mishaps. So when we bottle these, we bottle them at 50% alcohol. Straight from the barrel, they're closer to 60, which is a bit punchy for some. So 50 is a nice kind of middle ground. We'd asked the warehouse to bottle it at 50, and it came back at 53. So we had to redo all of our labels. Then after we'd done it the second time, we realized, or the warehouse pointed out, it's because it said Jamaican rum barrel. The first time around it said Barbados rum barrel, and we just made a mistake. And they said, look, we can't release this like that. So we had to redo all the neck labels as well. So we basically doubled our...
Your margin's getting eaten into here, Julian.
Yeah, it's cutting in and in and in. With 53% as well, you get slightly less bottles. So I think we got maybe 5 or 6 less bottles out of it. And then this happens as well. But ultimately, the owner of the distillery reached out to us and invited us there. We had a dram with him. We sat down. He really liked what we were doing, and he was so sound about it. He just said, look, next one, the name changes. We forget about it. So then Glaschu Spirits Co. was born. So we kept the Glaschu because we wanted it to be a Glasgow-based brand. Still reflects kind of Gaelic. It's whiskey. Ultimately, it's a Scottish product. So we wanted some Gaelic in there. But the Spirits Company kind of ties back into the industrial era vibe that we're going for with the labels as well. It's meant to be like...
It's classic. It's traditional.
Yeah. It's like a shipping company sort of thing.
What was it like going into that meeting with the big distiller?
Terrifying. because we knew like these guys can out-lawyer us any day. Like it's just Paul and I. We'd basically spent all the money we had available on this bottling. Damn good we'd already stopped buying anything else just so we could focus on selling our stuff. And then this happened, which we thought, okay, this is a huge spanner in the works. Are we gonna have to go to court about this? But thankfully, nothing ever happened of it.
I think it's nice that they recognised what you were trying to do and it wasn't a competition thing, in the same way that if you'd started the exact same business model and were using their name. Yeah,
no, exactly.
It wasn't a corporate espionage attack.
No. No.
How quickly did you see success in the whiskey space?
We've been going for 4 years now, and the bottling's for 2. Both Paul and I pay ourselves full time from this. It's both of our jobs, basically. Paul quit his job early this year.
I had a call with him not long after that. I remember that as a really big milestone. But you'd quit first, interestingly.
I quit first, yeah. I had the property as well, though. So I quit as soon as I could with the property stuff. So we hadn't been paying ourselves from Damn Good yet. I think we started paying ourselves 3 years after we started, roughly.
So it's not overnight riches.
No. And I think...
Do you think people have a misconception about that?
I think they do, but a lot of people do realise like you can't pay yourself in a company straight away. And I think we made a loss our first year as well, like most companies do. It just takes time.
And what was funding the losses then? Your full-time job, Paul was full-time, and then your property portfolio as well?
Basically. We were just pumping our own money into it. And we had, when we started the bottlings, we did have some investors jump in, and they were basically buying the cask, and we would pay for the bottling, and then we'd kind of split the revenue. And we've done a couple of those. We always did like a little shout out. Like we had one that was an aircraft flying over some vineyards that was finished in a wine cask, and we had the investors' initials as the aircraft registration on the tail. Like little things like that. So we did have some help, but with Damn Good to start with, we didn't have any external help.
What do you think were the biggest mistakes you made starting that business?
I guess not checking our trademarks was one. That was a close call. We've had some other financial mistakes, like buying stuff before we had money set. That's hit us, that stung us before as well. Or say we've had an order for a cask. The client's saying they're wanting to buy it. We go and then order it from the supplier, then the client backs out and we can't back out, so we're stuck with that. So it's being a bit more patient with money and not so gung-ho, and I think that's kind of it.
How do you and Paul balance each other out then? Because I've heard you say before that you both are quite similar in terms of the roles that you undertake.
We are. Although I think I'm more of the back end and I'm probably more of the creative side. Whereas Paul's more of the outgoing, foot in the ground, gets shit done basically type. And I think that's where we complement each other. In a lot of ways, we are very similar though. We're both analytical. We're both numbers guys. He was a data analyst for a while after he left the engineering job. So he understands numbers too, which is good. But then there's other ways where we just complement each other. So I kind of do the creative things like the Instagram posts, the videos, the mail shots, stuff like that, designing the website. And then he'll do calls, going to shops. We both do tastings and festivals and stuff like that as well.
It's funny because I spoke to Daniel Priestley around this time last year, the last time I was recording in Dubai, and he spoke about how important it is to get different skill sets within a partnership or within a trio.
Yeah.
But you have quite overlapping, but a couple of small differences that allow you to maybe thrive. And I know, for example, your expertise when it comes to creating content and posting content and that marketing side of things was something that you were doing on the property side, and it tied into the whiskey side. And you even almost had like a little bit of consultancy stuff for socials too. So you had built up a level of expertise and value there that maybe gave you a competitive advantage to maybe other people starting a business like yours.
Yeah, I think so. And I know some independent bottlers that have started out and hired a marketing agency and designers to do everything for them. You know, then you're already starting so far in the negative, whereas we did a lot of that ourselves. We did get a graphic designer to create our idea, but it was our idea. Like we told them, right, I want this train going like this, and I showed them an old picture sort of thing. They just make it come to life. Everything was kind of us doing it, especially like our ads as well. We just learned how to do Facebook ads and we just did it ourselves. Instagram, we didn't do any courses or anything. We just played around and saw what worked and then grew it from there.
And I think you built a good brand really quickly.
Yeah. The Instagram's how we started Damn Good, essentially. It was before we started buying, we were just taking pictures of bottles that we had. I'd take my DSLR out and we'd go up Queen's View or something like that and take some nice pictures, and I'd edit
Most
them.
Scottish possible photos, like hills and scenery and whiskey.
Yeah, the things go hand in hand and people like that sort of stuff. And that's how we built up a following. And then when we started buying our indie stock that we would resell, we just do the same. We just take really nice pictures of it. And that kind of made us stand out from other retailers. No one was putting in that much effort. You know, they had white background pictures of
stock
their bottles,
photos.
So yeah.
It's funny how much of a difference the quality of the presentation of something like that has on your perceptions of your brand.
Yeah.
So for example, if you did have just stock photos and you are a small Instagram account that's just started, how seriously do people take you when you are offering them either investment opportunities or just to purchase a new bottle? Much less so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it showed that we really put in the effort and we were passionate about it. You know, we were doing video reviews as well of just stuff that we had on the shelf, and it was content. It was good content.
How important did you realize content was? I guess you'd just done a course in property because of somebody's personality and ads. So there's some, you can maybe draw the lines.
Yeah. I guess it was when I started doing the property as well. I saw people were doing content around it. They were filming stuff, walkthroughs of them in their renovations saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I don't know if you watched any of my early ones, but they were shocking. They were so bad. It's really cringy going back to watch them, but I just had to do it. I just thought, right, I'm just going to start this. I'll get better at it. There's only one way to get better at it. And doing that and kind of showing people what I was doing was getting me investment. People were interested. People were like, oh, could you help me buy something? And I was like, maybe I could give you a return. That's how I got the investment. It was all through Instagram. And we applied the same kind of logic to Damn Good as well. You know, we just need to show people what we're doing. And it was us going out, taking pictures of bottles, filming each other, showing that we are two real people as the face of the brand rather than a faceless company.
And that you're doing it as well. I think that's really important, because one of the criticisms in the property space sometimes is that somebody doing the education is not doing active investment in terms of growing a portfolio. In the same way, if you were talking about whiskey investment or whiskey tasting and you weren't really being seen at the forefront of actually being active in that space, it's very difficult. And we were talking about sales training in the way in, some of the stuff I've done recently. What I think's helped me with every business that's brought me in so far has been that they can literally see that I'm making sales in the last year of really high numbers, and the year before that they can see the trajectory and that I'm actually like a man in the arena, so to speak, rather than just teaching from like a theory that I used to use 4 or 5 years ago and it might have worked back then, but who knows if it still works in 2024.
Exactly.
We talked about your shifting of your mindset through some of the courses that you did, the education that you did. I know that your self-development journey has been pretty significant since your father passed. What are some of the things that you've really focused on in terms of like your physical health?
I think it was also things like COVID and lockdown, and I actually ended up taking the vaccine as well because my girlfriend at the time was a nurse, my mum's a doctor. They were very heavy in that ideology. There was no way I wasn't taking it. And I was skeptical of it. And every time I voiced my concerns, I was kind of labeled as an anti-vaxxer. So I went along, but I was seeing more and more people speak out about it. And it just made me really worried that I'd kind of really shot myself in the foot and maybe damaged myself. So I focused a lot on healthy eating, and I actually went vegetarian for a while. And I tell you what, I did 6 months of vegetarianism and I felt terrible afterwards.
Won't be back.
No, I won't be back. But I did it wrong, not to slate vegetarianism, but I did it wrong. I was eating a lot of highly processed foods. I was eating corn. I was eating fake meats from Tesco and stuff like that. And basically
terrible for the gut, aren't they?
Carbs on carbs on carbs on carbs. And I'm like, why am I feeling so terrible? I thought I was eating healthy. And then I went the complete opposite and I went keto. Well, actually, I went carnivore first. And I realized, okay, this isn't quite sustainable. I'm going to try keto a little bit. And I felt great. Keto was amazing. I felt sharp. I felt clean. I was losing weight. I was a lot leaner. I was doing well in the gym. I was doing well in climbing as well. It was actually one of my climbing friends that got me into the keto diet, because there's a prominent climber that was advertising, well, not advertising, but promoting it sort of. So we tried it, and because it is all about maximizing lean muscle mass sort of thing, and for climbing, power to weight ratio is everything. So we tried that, and I think I did keto for almost a year. I loved it, but then I ended up getting gout from keto. So, and apparently,
what do you think led to that?
There is also what's the word when it's in your family?
Hereditary
thing. There's a hereditary aspect to it. I was more prone to it, but it was the excessive eating of meats and fats and everything. Because I was having steak and bacon and eggs and cheese and like maybe some fruits, but it was a lot of fatty foods, and that ended up having that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to step back a little bit. Over those years, I'd also cut out things like seed oils. I'd gone through keto. I'd naturally gone whole foods as well. I wasn't eating processed stuff anymore. Now I'm more of a whole foods, balanced diet, trying to avoid things with big ingredients lists. And funny thing with the gout as well is I went to the GP and they said, oh, you're going to have to take this medication. And I was like, okay, for how long? For the rest of your life? I was like, all right, surely not. And they were like, on top of that, for the first 6 months, you're going to have to take ibuprofen every day. I was like, ibuprofen every day? Like, if I take ibuprofen for 2 or 3 days, my gut's ruined. Like,
of course.
So I was like, okay, let's just park the brakes on this. I'm going to see if I can fix it myself. Because I knew it's also to do with diet, exercise, drinking enough water is a big thing as well. It's basically like a small form of arthritis. I took a month out and I was like, okay, this is when I went to the balanced diet. I'm going to eat less fats and meats. I'm going to try and be a bit more balanced with it. Focus on my water, exercise religiously. And I found out cherry supplements are also really good for it. Like
interesting.
Tart cherry supplements, and you can get them from Amazon. And I've done that and I've never had an issue again. And I could have been on medication for the rest of my life and still been 6 months on ibuprofen every day just now.
And who knows how your gut health recovers from that amount of damage to it.
Of course, all sorts of other problems will arise from that. I'll probably be prescribed some other medication on top of that then. And
yeah, do you know it's funny? Many doctors aren't like that. By the time this episode comes out, I've released an episode with Stephen Beattie, who is going through his medical degree just now, but also has empowered himself so much through his own diet to support himself, but also to support one of his parents who he's been a carer for since a child, to reduce some of his symptoms with Parkinson's.
Right.
So there are doctors that quote unquote get it from like a holistic perspective and don't just prescribe, but the automatic response is take this pill and then you can leave the surgery and they move on because they're stressed and they're running between appointments and they're maybe only armed with the solutions that they've got. Whereas for somebody like you with like traits that are high agency, you're probably like, oh, well, actually you could prescribe me like more functional interventions and I will do them rather than take the pill once a day and then not change any of my other lifestyle factors.
Yeah. I've never really been someone for the easy option as well. Like I knew there was a better way of doing it. And then ultimately it is an easier way because you're just living a bit better, you know, like exercising. One thing I kind of brought back into that was cardio as well. I wasn't doing a lot of cardio. I was just running and I was just climbing and going to the gym. So I brought running back in. And actually I haven't ran now in the last 3 months because I was away in Indonesia where there's not a lot of options for running. And now being winter, I've not got back into it. But the climbing in the gym has been constant, yeah.
And the cold water too.
Yeah. The cold water, that started a lot earlier. That started around lockdown time. My mum used to always swim in the swimming pool in the local high school. And when they closed that, lockdown was around April time. So she was living away from me. I was living in Glasgow. She was up kind of Balfron area. She suggested, why don't we go Loch Lomond for a swim and we'll swim socially distanced and we can catch up. And we made it a tradition. We did it every weekend and we almost have done it every weekend since then for the last 4 or 5 years.
That's really nice. And I think spending that quality time with your mum doing an activity during the height of that period as well, because she's still dealing with the loss of your father at that point, surely, because it's what, a year afterwards and you're you want to be spending time with her, not having her isolated.
Of course, she's alone.
And also in a medical role where the stress on that type of role was probably at its highest because we had no idea what was coming next then.
Absolutely. And it was a nice way to catch up with her. And at the time, I didn't even look into the benefits of cold water. It wasn't cold water exposure for me, it was swimming. I actually did start off with a wetsuit, and I haven't worn a wetsuit in ages now, but I started off with a wetsuit in summer, and then I realized eventually it's like, actually, I'm just going to go without, solely because I hated putting the thing on and off. Like, my mum wears a wetsuit, fair enough, she's 60, and we were swimming for like half an hour or so it is fair enough that you'd wear one, but eventually I was just like, I'm going to try it without. And I wear like the wetsuit socks and the gloves. And it was so much better. And then obviously doing it every weekend starts getting colder and colder and colder. And around that time, being exposed to content on like mindset and everything, cold water exposure was a big thing in lockdown. It
suddenly boomed, didn't it?
Yeah, ice tubs and everything.
Well, people had whiskey barrels, didn't they?
Yeah.
Where they were jumping them in their back garden.
They did. So I kind of tied the two together. It's like, okay, I can still see my mum and chat to her, but I'll also be getting a health benefit. I'm just going to raw dog it and do some cold water exposure. So I was swimming in Loch Lomond December, January, February, no wetsuit, sometimes 20 minutes at a time. And I just conditioned myself over the year, so it was fine. And I'd bring friends and I'd be like, right, just take it easy. And they'd be in like for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, almost hypothermic. But doing it every week had gotten me used to it. And now I still do it.
What do you find the biggest benefits from it?
Clarity and just your mood. It's almost like, I like to, when I post it in my story, I call it my Sunday reset, like, because it's like it wipes the slate clean. And I just feel, especially for that day, you feel amazing afterwards. When you've warmed back up, in the winter, when the 10, 15 minutes of severe shaking has worn off, you just feel so good for the rest of the day. You sleep amazing. And I feel like my thoughts are clearer. I'm just in a better headspace. I'm a better person when I do it. So when I don't do it and when I miss it, I really notice it.
That's one of the key things about routines. I think podcasts like mine are as guilty of it as any, where people talk about like, what can you add to your morning routine? What can you add to your evening routine to like level up, whether it's gratitude journaling or breath work or cold water or patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time, whatever it is, right? It's really hard to know what's being a game changer and a dial mover until you take it out and you realize what's happening when you miss it. So I removed gratitude journaling for a little while. I got a little bit lazy with it, and I felt a little bit more transient day to day in terms of I wasn't as grateful genuinely, and that's what the name of the journal and what I was trying to do. In the same way, if I remove my morning walk before I log onto my laptop, I'm not as clear, I'm not as high energy. I've done less activity, but I'm more sluggish. Crazy. Whereas if I've walked and I've moved and I've listened to something that is thought-provoking, whether it's a podcast or an audiobook, I come back and I'm ready to serve myself and serve others. So it's when you sometimes remove something. So you've been in Bali, Indonesia for a while. When you remove the cold water, you're kind of like, oh, I feel better when I do this. It has got value to it.
So thankfully in Bali, the gym that we went to
had one.
It had an amazing cold dip. And even though it was 30 degrees outside, it was 5 degrees in this thing. It was so good. It's better than Loch Lomond does in the summer. So it was nice. So I still got to do that. The one thing I was missing in Bali though was walking.
Okay.
Like you, I like my morning walks. It's something I do every morning as well. And I try and get my 10K steps every day. My average step count, like weekly in Bali, was horrific.
Were you on the scooters instead?
Yeah, because you just drive everywhere. And there's no pavement, so you can't really, I'm going to walk to the restaurant sort of thing. You'll get flattened in the traffic. It's madness out there, so you kind of have to get in scooters. So like the only steps I do is maybe if I got on the treadmill or something at the gym, but it's not the same.
You're not going to do an hour walk in that, whereas you could walk an hour on a fresh, crisp morning like today. Yeah. You probably went out with the dog for however long and you feel you've get like 5,000-6,000 steps. It's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, there were some days where I had like 900 steps in the day and I'm like, oh, this is
I feel
disgusting.
Itchy just thinking about that. Yeah,
look at it. So
especially after you built such a habit.
I know. So that's one thing I missed out there, definitely. But like you said, there's so many things you could add into your morning routine and I tried a lot of them. I kind of stuck and landed with journaling, gratitude, walking in the morning, and the cold dips isn't every morning, it's once a week. and a green shake is another thing I do. AG1.
You tick off that health benefit.
Yeah, I've done that for a long time as well, and that kind of stemmed from. It was actually around the time I did the vegetarianism thing. I thought I might be missing out on some things, which I was, like things from not eating meat. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna get something that covers all bases. I was listening to Joe Rogan a lot back then. He's he's a big sponsor or AG1's a big sponsor there. So, I was hearing it all the time. I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot, and I've done it almost every day since then as well.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see this transformation that you've been on, where you were pretty unfulfilled and pretty directionless. You had these, and people nowadays maybe say like, mental health like issues where you had anxiety and dread. Those are horrible feelings that you want to avoid. Whereas now I look at you and you seem very aligned and focused, and everything's pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the right path now. And
the golden path.
The golden path. I'm on the golden path. And it took a while. It's not an overnight thing. It's taken 4 years, I guess, since I started. But I feel like now I'm finally in a place where I know where I'm going. I know what I need to do. And I'm just happier for it.
Yeah. One of the things you spoke about in terms of writing your journal is about family. And you said that you had your dad as a role model in terms of wanting to be available as a father to support your child throughout the upbringing. How have you managed to bring that into fruition as 2024 Julian?
Well, I ended the relationship that was going on in 2020, and that kind of scuppered my plans for starting a family. Obviously, you need another
two
person.
to tango.
Yeah, you need two to tango. But I don't know why. I was asked this question recently, actually. I don't know what it was in me I've always really wanted to be a dad and really wanted a family, and I think it's something
even before losing your father.
Even before losing my father, and I think it's something that's more common, excuse me, in women to be maternal in that sense. Guys maybe get it a bit later, but I've always kind of wanted a family, and I think it's maybe growing up as an only child. I wanted siblings. I kind of want like a slightly bigger family. I want kids. And so when I was single again, that was always that was the thing I was looking for. But I was single for like 2 years, and I felt like I couldn't really find anyone that was aligned in that sense. Like I had some relationships that lasted a month or so, but there was always some red flags that stood out, and I never found the one person that I could start a family with. Now in 2024, in the last kind of 6 months, I have found someone, and hopefully I think she is the person I would like to do that with.
You've been a lot more intentional with your dating, albeit we spoke ages ago, maybe even like 18 months ago, and you were like, I think I'm being intentional. Like you're like, the red flags that were coming up were either not ready for kids, didn't want kids, or maybe other things where you were like not suitable for kids.
Yeah.
So you were actively trying to make it happen. It just, you weren't finding the right girl.
It wasn't meant to be. That's the way I look at it. I feel like I learned something from every one of those failed relationships as well. They were all lessons along the road to find who I'm with now. And it's stuff that, I was making mistakes in these relationships as well. I'm not trying to say it was all these girls were terrible. I was terrible at the time as well. I had to learn how to be who I am now. I'd never been single really before. Like I was in a relationship from like 13 to 14, and then from 16 till like 25. Like I was in a super long relationship. So coming out at 25, never really been single. The last time I'd been single, Tinder hadn't been invented yet. So I was super new to it. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to find girls and talk to them, and how to be in a proper, like a good relationship. Like my last one had failed essentially. Like I had made mistakes as well. It was partly my fault too. So I had to learn those lessons along the way. And I think it was all meant to happen the way it did.
What advice would you give to guys listening to this that want to date more seriously with somebody that they see like a really long-term family future with?
I think you attract the kind of energy that you give out, and you need to know what you want as well. It's all well and good like going out on Tinder and seeing it as a numbers game, but you need to be a bit more selective with it. I was like very obviously doing my golden path and everything, I was writing down every day what I want, or reading every day what I wanted, thinking about it. I knew exactly what I was looking for. That's why I knew when these smaller relationships ended, like I knew it wasn't meant to be. That wasn't the person. And when I did find the person eventually, I knew it was.
Because it aligned with what you were writing about and thinking about.
Exactly. And I was putting out that energy, that frequency, and I think that attracts the right person when they're on that same wavelength. I'm using lots of woo-woo terms here, but
I think you're right though, because I think there's two strands to it. I do think there are times when girls find you more attractive when you're more abundant, in terms of you can sort of take it or leave it. There's a weird thing that girls like attach to you when you're kind of a little bit unfussed, or a little bit like, oh well, if you don't like me, that's fine, or like, that's fine, like we can go out, but if not, I'm gonna go out with her over there. Like there's an element of that's attractive to girls because it shows you've got a level of status, but it also creates an atmosphere of insecurity, which is not what you want when you're looking to start something more serious.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, energy and abundance, like that's what you want to give off, that you're in a good place, you can provide, you're not stressed and worried. And I feel like I had to cultivate that a little bit over the years as well. When I first started, build up to it. When I first started, I wasn't in that place. I was still like, it took me a few years to get out of being that guy that drank every weekend and, going on dates, and it was just drinking. Like that wasn't what I was looking for. So why was it doing?
Why would I have that first date if that's not what I'm going to be doing with you once we're settled?
Yeah.
So you mean to say having a nice Porsche isn't enough?
No, it's not enough.
It was a factor in making you feel confident, I hope.
Yes, definitely. And it was more for me. Like that's why I buy it. But you'd be surprised, girls aren't really interested in it.
That's true. That's true. It's a signal of status and position and capability, but it's not like they don't care whether it's a Porsche, whether it's a BMW, or whether it's a Mercedes. They're just glad that you've got a car and you're not like a degenerate.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Given that whiskey and property have pretty fundamentally like changed your life and the position that you're in, but 4 or 5 years ago you drank whiskey, you'd lived in a house, but you had no real concept of like the investment opportunities in there.
No, not at all.
Does it surprise you how quick things have happened?
Very much. I mean, if I even 5 years ago, even like 2019, when I knew I wanted to do something else, looking at where I am now, I'd never have expected this. Like, I'd never think I'd be running a whiskey brand and buying properties, sort of thing. Like, I thought, man, maybe I'll find a different job that's better. I have no idea how it happened, to be honest. It just happened.
That's so cool. I think you've done it all intentionally, though. I think you're step by step going forward. The guys listening to this that are really interested in whiskey, I want to ask some questions with them in mind.
Yeah, sure.
Including myself.
Of course.
Why is whiskey an asset that you gravitate towards now in terms of your investments?
The tax benefits is a big thing. Obviously, we're biased as well because we're bottlers. I don't see us as a whiskey investment company. We're a bottling company that offers casks as investment options. But the tax benefits with whiskey are there's zero capital gains. You're not paying any VAT or anything when you buy, excuse me, because it has a predictable lifespan of less than 50 years. So HMRC class it as a wasting asset. And it's the same with things like wine and fine art as well. The other thing is it's tangible as well. I tried my luck in digital assets, crypto. Obviously, crypto's doing good now, and I do still invest in crypto. I failed back then, and I kind of lost my trust in it. I tried Forex as well. I lost a lot of money in Forex, so I don't fuck with that anymore. But I liked the idea that it was tangible. It was something real. It was something you could actually take out and try and consume and enjoy, really. And I think it's a big thing. A lot of people that buy from us aren't the investment side or the financial side isn't their number one. It's a passion project for them. They want it as gifts over the years, and they'll sell it as an nest egg or so for their kids, but it's something they can dip into, and it's always whiskey drinkers that are buying it from us typically. So we never saw ourselves selling them as investments, but it got to the stage where, we were buying casks for our own bottlings. Eventually we were getting building the relationships and getting offered really, really good casks, but we didn't want to lose out on the opportunity. You know, sometimes a door opens, and if you don't take it, the door closes forever.
Somebody else will offer this.
Especially the whiskey industry is very, I don't know, it's very who you know, and it's like, it's not transparent in that sense of where we're buying it from. So like, if we get an in with a big supplier, maybe it's like someone that works at Diageo or something like that. If we get an in, we kind of have to take something, otherwise the door might close. So we were getting offered stuff, and we were like, okay, we don't have money to buy this. Why don't we find someone? We knew a couple of people that wanted to invest in the company, but we said we'd never sell shares. It was just Paul and I, you know, keeping it 50-50. So we're like, why don't we find someone that wants to invest in us, but use the cask as security essentially. And they can buy the cask, they can hold it, the cask will appreciate, they'll have an asset backed against it, and then maybe down the line we can still buy that off them and we can bottle it. So when we're selling casks, we're looking at them as our future bottlings almost. And we never tie anyone in to sell it back to us. You know, ultimately it's yours. You can do with it whatever the hell you want. We can even help you bottle it yourself. But we're keeping the possibility open that we could get that back. You know, we're not losing the opportunity.
It creates a little bit of a circular economy opportunity.
Exactly.
I'll tell you what drew me towards it. Number one, diversifying my investment and the different assets that I've got, from crypto, stock shares, the property I own. Whiskey was a good one. The capital gains element, obviously, particularly,
especially now,
particularly as things are evolving and changing. I think there's going to be a lot of tax grabs in the future too.
It's only the beginning, I think.
Like. Yeah, and as you say, it's an appreciating asset. It's perishable, under 50 years potentially, but there is that like Scottish element to it as well.
Yeah,
and I'm Scottish and I'm very British as well. People like or dislike that when I talk about that sort of thing, but it's nice to have something that's made in our country that is tangible, as you say, and you can like look, touch, feel, and understand what it is. And it's just nice that we've got access to these things through people like yourself and Paul, where it is easy to get into and easy to understand how it works. And I love that you brought across that almost model of like fixed returns from the property space. So for example, me and you could JV on a buy to let. I give you 30 grand, you give me 33 grand back in a year's time. I've not improved my portfolio, but you've done that. In the same way, I can help fund a cask to some extent and get given my 10, 12, whatever % we agree back. And while I'm not building up a whiskey portfolio, always, sometimes I am, I'm able to use it to like, basically as another asset class.
Exactly. And I like how you brought that in. Yeah, I got that idea from property. So if I hadn't done property, we probably never would have gone down this path, because it was
I think it's a great offering you've got.
Yeah, I think so too.
But no, of course. But I think it's a great idea because it gives people another opportunity. Absolutely. And sometimes it's not as expensive as property too. So like one of the first ones that my brother and I did with you was fairly low cost.
Yeah.
And we were able to just test how it all worked. We had the reliability of knowing you, but it was like, okay, it's fairly low. Whereas like if I'd put in like $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever it was we put into property, you're going to be one of like how many people involved in that JV? Like 5, 10, and it's a bit messier.
Yeah, the cask share thing that you're talking about was super popular as well, because that, even whiskey is still like, if you're buying a cask, your minimum's going to be like 2 to 3 grand. Which is still a lot of people, but we kind of opened it up with £500 shares, and it was in that bottling project. The nice thing is we'd done so many bottlings before that, we knew what we were going to earn on it, we knew how long it's going to roughly take to sell out, so we could guarantee those returns, because it's still just a chunk of our margin in it.
It lets people dabble in it a little bit as well, rather than the big whack as well. What do you think people get wrong about whiskey investing?
I mean, one of the major pitfalls is paying too much and buying the wrong thing. There are a lot of whiskey investment companies out there, a lot of them London-based, that will sell any old crap at extortionate prices, and people get stung by it. Because we've now built up a bit of a reputation, some of these people come to us to sell their investments and say, I had one guy recently, I was like, oh, I'm looking to sell this. What can you offer me for it? And I was like, oh, I gave him a price. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, I paid £5,000 or so 5 years ago. And I'm saying to him, like, it's not worth £5,000 now. It's not worth anywhere near it, basically, because what they sold was a really, really boring cask that there's loads and loads of. The market's flooded with them.
Supply and demand's fucked.
Exactly. So, and that's the thing what these whiskey investment companies do. They'll buy bulk, like loads and loads of spirit. And typically, it's all from a handful of distilleries as well, because they must have needed the money, reached out to all these, or these companies reached out to them. And there's the investment market's flooded with the same stuff. So when we're selling casks, we're looking for stuff that isn't anywhere else, basically. Or we're doing something to make it stand out. Like we did buy some bulk spirit from Auchentoshan, say, and we put it into fancy wine casks. We put it into like Sauternes wine barrels or Moscatel and Marsala wine, and that's something that no one else is offering. So it's something that will be desirable down the line as well. And looking at it from a bottling perspective, something that spent 10 years in a wine cask is going to be really dark, really sweet, really easy to sell. So if we buy it, it's going to be a great bottling for us. But other bottlers are also going to be really interested in that cask, which makes it an easy exit for the person that bought it in the first place.
It's great how quick you've got up to speed in this area where you bring a level of knowledge and expertise now. And I guess Paul had that to start with the business, and you had the energy and enthusiasm for it, but then you need to be able to learn the lingo as well. Again, to hark back to some of the sales stuff that even we've been talking about within your business. Knowledge is foundational for the trust with the customer, particularly somebody who doesn't understand the process, and you're able to talk them through it. Yeah. If you can guide them from, I'm in this particular state and the bridge looks like this, and this is where your desired or end state is, the bridge needs to be really clearly explained how somebody walks along it. And sometimes people are like, oh, like the sales psychology or the skill that got you there, and you're thinking, no, like, yes, there's principles of psychology along this path and this bridge, but there's a lot of information, guidance, probably collateral that somebody can read or watch that enabled them to get to that point too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's all self-learned as well. There's no course for becoming an independent bottler or selling
Maybe
gas.
You start one.
I don't know if there's the demand for that.
We'll start a wait list and we'll check.
Yeah.
You'd be like, guys, does anyone want to become an independent bottler and go up against you?
I also don't want to make too much competition for myself. You know, there's a lot of indie bottlers out there already, but that's always something we offer to people, is to help them bottle it, but we can help them bottle it under our brand ultimately as well.
If we think back to 2019, is there anything you would do differently with that £70,000?
No. I'm glad I did it the way I did. I learned the hard way. I made my mistakes on that Govan Hill flat, definitely. I wasted a lot of that 70k on that. Yeah, it would have been nice to get something better on day one, but I would have made those mistakes down the line. It was that one that taught me renovating, basically. The Denniston still needed a refurb, but the Govan Hill one was like straight into the deep end with everything needing done, basically. And I had no idea really about anything. I'd learned the theory, I'd never put it into practice. And now, you know, I was straight away into the deep end. I think it was good that I made that mistake early on and, you know, paid the price, but it was worth it.
The lessons are there.
Yeah.
Second last question for you then. If you reflect on the 5 years since your dad passing away, it looks like you've made tremendous progress. What does the next 5 years need to look like for you to consider those a success?
My next 5 years of the golden plan. I would like to have kids in the next 5 years, definitely. A house for my family and my kids. I see myself fitter, leaner. I kind of say like agile, strong, smart. I'd like DamGood to be doing well and well enough to support staff as well, so that Paul and I can actually step back a little bit. I do see us having staff quite early on. We're almost looking at it next year, maybe. The property business, I see it continuing to grow. I don't really have a set figure of how much, but I want to keep buying every year.
You shared last night on Instagram that you're buying around 2 a year?
Yeah. That was my goal for 2024, was 2. And I've just had offer accepted on number 3. But that'll probably be 2025 by now.
By the time it goes through the sausage machine, it'll be 2025.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a nightmare. But just continue to grow the portfolio, continue to grow my health, my wealth, my family, and just live a good, fulfilled life.
And keep following the plans and the affirmations that are written down.
Exactly. Stay on the golden path.
Beautiful, Julian. Well, I've had such a fun time. I'm sure the listeners have as well. If they want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
Instagram is where I'm most active. I am on LinkedIn as well under my name, but you'll probably wait a while for a response on there. Instagram is Julian_Mithoff. I'm sure the spelling will be in the notes. Whiskey business, DamGoodDrams, DAM Good Drams, all one word. And then Glaschu Spirits Co. as well, if you're interested in the bottling side of things.
Beautiful stuff. All of those will be linked in the show notes. Thank you to you, Julian, and thank you to the listener. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.